Hi, everyone. It's Emil. It's Emil Guillermo. Emil Amok to you. Welcome to my Takeout, my takes on all things considerable. It's our talk show. It is. This is our talk show in the old style, I would say. The old style news talk. A guy gets on the mic, picks up the news, and then reacts. And then you react and you call in. Although here I relieve you of that duty. You don't have to call in. You can curse to the skies. You can curse yourselves. You can shake your fist at the internet or whatever, wherever you're listening. But I'm always reacting to the news in a kind, open, meditative way. The big news of the day just crossed my internet just as I decided, let's talk. It's the news that Mikhail Gorbachev, reformist Soviet leader, is dead at 91, reported by the New York Times. You know that obit has been waiting for years. It's interesting. Gorbachev, you know him because he had that port wine stain on his forehead. You know him because he gave us the words, the principles, mainly, glasnost and perestroika, openness, and a kind of a peaceful coexistence. I mean, it was a way of thawing the Cold War and working with each other, East and West, right? Here's the line from the New York Times headline: Mikhail S. Gorbachev, reformist Soviet leader, is dead at 91. Subhead: adopting principles of glasnost and perestroika, he weighed the legacy of 7 decades of communist rule and set a new course, presiding over the end of the Cold War and the dissolution of the USSR. And the Beatles never changed the words of that song. It was still back in the USSR. But now that's why we call it Russia now. That's why the Soviet Union was no more. But Gorbachev was the pendulum swing away from the Cold War, and it really opened up politics. It opened up the idea of freedom, of openness, of democracy. As we moved from that era, that Cold War era where we all had missiles pointing at one another, trying to work together, peacefully coexist beyond the Cold War. And now look at where we are. We got Putin, the strong man, in Russia, trying to take over Ukraine, seeing those lands not as autonomous, but as those belonging to the old Soviet Union, to Russia, right? And this is part of the impermanence of the world. I mean, we deal with this, but when you see it happen, you say, God, I lived through some of that period, or most of that period, perestroika, glasnost, the dissolution of the USSR, the opening up of lands that were formerly satellites of the Soviet Union, freedoms given to those people. And you see how long it takes to get the pendulum swinging the other way. Because I think that's where we are now. Let me just read the first three graphs here of Marilyn Berger's New York Times obit. Or it's not really an obit, it's the news story. Mikhail S. Gorbachev, whose rise to power in the Soviet Union set in motion a series of revolutionary changes that transformed the map of Europe and ended the Cold War, that threatened the world with nuclear annihilation, has died in Moscow. He was 91. His death was announced on Tuesday by Russia's state news agencies, citing the city's central clinical hospital. The report said he had died after a long in grave illness. I suppose we can trust them on that. Few leaders in the 20th century, indeed, in any century, have had such a profound effect on their time. In little more than 6 tumultuous years, Mr. Gorbachev lifted the Iron Curtain, decisively altering the political climate of the world. Of the world. Imagine. I mean, I've mentioned this before. You got to go back to 1989. That was like a key moment. And that was the time when I went from local television guy in San Francisco and I became the host of NPR's All Things Considered. 89 was just a fantastic, it opened up this era. Let me go to this graph. At home, Gorbachev promised and delivered greater openness as he set out to restructure his country's society and faltering economy. It was not his intention to liquidate the Soviet Empire, but within 5 years of coming to power, he presided over the dissolution of it, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. He ended the Soviet misadventure in Afghanistan, and in an extraordinary 5 months in 1989, stood by as the communist system imploded from the Baltics to the Balkans in countries already weakened by widespread corruption and moribund economies. For this, he was hounded from office by hardline communist plotters and disappointed liberals alike, the first group fearing that he would destroy the old system and the other worried that he would not. It was abroad that he was hailed as heroic. To George T. Kennan, the distinguished American diplomat and Sovietologist, Mr. Gorbachev was a miracle, a man who saw the world as it was, unblinkered by Soviet ideology. And really, that's how I'm going to remember Gorbachev. I mean, he really did usher in this period where we saw democracy begin to spread, this idea of liberty and freedom, the dissolution of the USSR. And this also coincided with the revolution technologically, right? The internet was beginning, not quite commercially, but it was beginning, 89, 90. The first commercial impact, maybe 94, 95. But certainly by 89, we saw what a global impact, an openness through the internet would mean. It would mean we'd be able to see what we were all doing. And you couldn't hide behind an iron curtain and say, well, this is the way we're going to do it here. Don't pay attention to what they're doing in America. I mean, once we were able to see what the modern world was like, everyone wanted a taste of that modern world. So we honor Gorbachev because that's what he stood for. And notice how long it took before the pendulum began swinging the other way. And that's really always the case. The lesson that we learn is that history may seem so weighty, but things remain in a state of impermanence. Things always change, right? As the French say, plus ça change. That things don't stay the same. Or things don't, even as they change, right? So if you go to my ALDEF column, aaldef.org/blog, I talk about how in 1993, I'm in the Philippines as the dictator Marcos, as he was implicated, his soldiers, military was implicated in the killing, the assassination of Benigno Aquino, the key opponent to Marcos. Aquino comes back from exile in the United States, arrives August 21st, gets gunned down, assassinated, and it was August 31st, 1983, that, well, the assassination was my call to go to the Philippines and cover it as a journalist. But the moment that really made my trip was August 31st, the funeral procession of Aquino in the Philippines, where you had 1 million people on the streets. I mean, when do you see 1 million people on the streets? I mean, there weren't even 1 million people on the streets in some of these marches we've had in the last 10 years, 15 years in the United States. It's always disputed. How many people were there? And of course, anything that Trump was associated with, everyone inflates numbers. But in Manila, August 31st, 1983, 1 million people there, united, rich and poor, all of them Filipinos. It was the beginning of people power in the Philippines. The people power we would ultimately see in 1986 that would topple Marcos. But you first saw it in 83. And I have to say, I'd never seen anything like it before or since. 1 million people united, mourning Aquino, damning Marcos, yearning for a freedom that they still haven't yet achieved. And that was all part of this time. You know, Gorbachev in the 80s into the 90s, the change in Europe, the fall of despotic rule, the fall of the Berlin Wall. I mean, really, it was an incredible time between 89 to, you know, maybe the mid 89 to, I don't know, the mid 90s. And now for sure, pendulum swung back the other way. Life, politics, there's an impermanence that we must respect. It never just stays. It's always subject to change. And it makes you wonder about that arc of justice, that long arc of justice that we say, well, it'll bend in our direction. It'll bend in our direction if we keep moving in the right direction, in the same direction, if we stand united. But rarely do we stand united altogether for long. So what a shock to see that Gorbachev's dead. I mean, the ideas of Gorbachev have kind of been under fire ever since Putin took over. And certainly the war over Ukraine has made people question, what's up with Russia? What's up with Putin? It's the strongman idea. And it seems like the war is picking up now. I mean, the latest reports, you know, with all the, the nuclear side story, the drone side story, everything is sort of, after 6 months, we're still in it. Well, I say they're still in it. The rest of the world is being cautious. And I don't know why. NATO, where are they? The United States, giving support. Somewhat. Ask people around you about the war in Ukraine. And 6 months ago, we were all wearing little flags, Ukrainian flags. Now, I don't see any Ukrainian flags. I don't see anyone wearing a Ukrainian t-shirt. They're thinking of them, but it's like, oh, that's over there. And I don't know when that's really going to change back. But if there is the kind of escalation that appears to be imminent, someone on the part of our allies, on the part of the U.S., is going to have to step up. All right. Well, I really wanted to talk about this other thing today. I wasn't really going to talk about geopolitical things, except when Gorbachev dies, you got to talk about Gorbachev. Gorby, as he was called. And it's true, he was considered a hero. Gorbachev would come to America in retirement almost as, or he would tour the United States almost as much as you'd see a former president. I mean, a number of times he'd come to California, he'd come to San Francisco, different foundations. Gorby was well loved and seen as a hero in the West. So it's sad that we talk about his death at age 91 in Moscow. Today, I wanted to talk about the student loan debacle, though. I don't call it a debacle. I call it student loan forgiveness is the right thing. Don't call it fake news. Don't call it a fake forgiveness. It's real and it's deserving. And yet we see from the left and from the right people attacking student loan debt. We see white conservative media trotting out their black conservatives saying, oh, this is moral turpitude. We are teaching people to be, wasteful, or teaching people not to be honest and not to be moral. That's just a bunch of hogwash. There's a guy on the Wall Street Journal, Jason Riley. I mean, he was spouting that off on the Wall Street Journal over the weekend. Ridiculous. This isn't anything about moral turpitude of the borrowers. If there's any kind of moral turpitude, it's on the part of those who preyed on the borrowers. And who are the borrowers? The people who borrowed the money, for the most part, members of the BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color communities, who were preyed on by private, for-profit colleges that forced loans on these people, admitted these people to their colleges, and then left them high and dry with debt and no degree and busted dreams. That's what you got to be upset about. Forgiving the borrowers is the right thing. But going after the predators, that's where the justice system and the Department of Education has to keep going. And I mention this because a new thing today, the Biden plan, or as it's called, and thankfully it's called the Biden-Harris plan. It's the Biden-Harris administration. But its plan of forgiving up to $10,000 for direct student loans and another $10,000 if you had a Pell Grants to people who are from low-income situations, so up to $20,000. It should be hailed as a significant thing. But the left says, hey, wait a minute. People have a lot more debt than that. Why don't you absolve it all? And people on the right say, wait a minute. 10,000, 20,000, that's too much. No debt should be forgiven. And of course, the 10,000, 20,000 is a nice compromise because it does give some relief to the people who borrowed. But as I said, if you want to question the moral turpitude in this story, it's not on the part of the borrowers. It's on the part of those who lent the money in the first place. And who was that? It was the private, for-profit predators who exploited education and exploited people's dreams. You think education is going to pull you out of your hole? You want education, you need it. You look at a course catalog, you say, I could be a vet tech, I could be a med tech, I could be a dental tech, I could be a tech. It's only going to cost me $5,000 or whatever, however many thousands of dollars. I don't have it. I'll put it on my credit card. Oh, no. Here's a student loan. The student loans were given out. There were promises made. And then schools shut down, leaving students holding the bag. I mean, that's what happened. And now that's the pattern. We saw it with the Centurion schools. We saw it with ITT Tech. All those schools. We're not talking generally. I mean, yeah, the Stanfords and the Yales and the Harvards, yeah. People took out loans to go there. But generally speaking, if you're a private college, well endowed, you're giving the money, you're giving people all the money they need to go to your school. And I saw this guy, Jason Riley, in the Wall Street Journal say, oh, well, what are we telling people? You know, these are people borrowing money to go to these Ivy schools. No. Most of the people who were in the student loan programs were caught and preyed on by these for-profit schools. And when the schools didn't live up to the promise that, oh, we'll give you a guaranteed job for life, when the certifications weren't there even to give people a legitimate degree. I mean, some of these schools weren't even certified to teach. I mean, that's predatory lending. And that's why what Biden was doing is a good thing, because it really addresses the bigger issue, but in particular, these for-profit colleges, for-profit private colleges. And today, just today, the Biden administration released a specific example. This is a headline. Education Department approves $1.5 billion in debt relief for 79,000 borrowers who attended Westwood College. Westwood College is in Colorado and Illinois. That's where they're based. Doesn't necessarily mean that's all where they operated. If you're a Westwood student, you know, you went online or whatever. There were a ton of students at Westwood College, 79,000. And then they shut down in 2016. Well, look at what happened. It took 6 years for the Department of Education to analyze evidence from the attorneys general of Colorado and Illinois. There was a lot of evidence that showed that widespread misrepresentation about the value of its credentials for attendees and graduate employment prospects. I mean, 1.5 billion in discharges. That's what this plan today for 79,000 borrowers, that's what it does. One school. Now you look at all those schools that you see as you drive down the freeway, as you drive by business parks, and you say, I drive by my area, there's a place called Stellar Career University. All right, look, these schools don't have to be Harvard and Yale. But if you're called Stellar Career University, doesn't that just sound like a bunch of BS? What kind of college calls itself Stellar Career University? I don't want to cast aspersions on them. Although, if you're there, you got to look at what they promise and to see if their promises are similar to Corinthian or ITT, Technical Institute, or now Westwood College. This is a quote from James Cavall, who is the Undersecretary of Education. He says, Westwood College's exploitation of students and abuse of federal financial aid place it in the same circle of infamy occupied by Corinthian colleges and ITT Technical Institute. Westwood operated on a culture of false promises, lies, and manipulation in order to profit off student debt that burdened borrowers long after Westwood closed. I mean, that's a real thing. And the release they put out said Westwood routinely misled prospective students by grossly misrepresenting that its credentials would benefit their career prospects and earning potential, specifically by promising prospective students that they would be employed in their field within 6 months after graduation, and that a Westwood degree would make them, quote, employable for the rest of their lives. This is the kind of scheme that these schools use to misrepresent themselves. Westwood also presented grossly inflated job placement rates. They had a false employment pledge that guaranteed students that it would help pay their bills if they could not find a job within 6 months of graduating. All turned out to be BS. So now here is the government saying, okay, Westwood, you're out of business, but we're going to relieve the borrowers $1.5 billion in debt relief. This is just one school. So you imagine how the debt relief at $10,000 to $20,000 is important, because, you know, most of those borrowers are not going to the Harvards and Yales and Stanfords of the world, because those schools would take care of, you know, they would make sure that borrowers would have a way to pay back debt. Well, first of all, they wouldn't overpromise. Chances are, if you had a degree from Yale or Stanford, you would get a better job. I mean, there's networks of alumni there to help. But Westwood College, Westwood College went out of business. And this, I think, is the real problem, because all the people say, oh, student loan relief, it's just bogus, it shouldn't happen, it costs too much. You know, they bring up the moral issue. What about the people who lent the money? What about the Westwood colleges? They're all gone. They're all defunct. The venture capitalists who founded, or the hedge funds that started and funded these schools that crop up off the side of the road, luring people in, getting them to take student loans, and then reneging. Who goes after them? Oh, they're protected by bankruptcy laws. They're protected by all the financial laws. They protect corporates that leave people high and dry. You know, we got to worry about people, real people, the students, the borrowers, not just the students now, the parents of the students, because a lot of the loans were parent loans. You got people in their 60s and 70s with student loans. It's not because they're freshmen or sophomores in college or graduate students, because they're parents. And the schools got them to take out parent loans, which now destroys, the whole loan system not only destroys the young people who are hoping for a dream, but it destroys the retirement of the old people who now suddenly find themselves tens of thousands of dollars in debt. So next time you hear someone say, oh, student loan debt, what a farce, fake news, fake loans. Those students Look, the students aren't using the money to buy a used Honda or a used Ford. They're not using the money to go off on extended spring break vacations to Cabo or wherever, Hawaii. Most of the people who are using these student loans are using it for 2-year colleges or these private for-profit colleges. And they're left holding the bag when the colleges overpromised and underdelivered. I just think America has to do something for people who are making under 150,000, under 250,000 if you're married couple. I mean, that's who is being targeted by the whole student loan forgiveness program by Biden. Those people deserve a break because for many of them, student loan debt is the only thing keeping them from pursuing their dreams, from buying a house. Next time you hear someone poo-poo the student loan forgiveness, you just look them straight in the eye and say, what about the people who lent the money? What about the people who gave the money to these people and who preyed on these people's dreams and then left them without a degree, left them with debt, and left them with busted dreams? That's why student loan forgiveness is an important idea. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And when they do, as I said, look them in the eye and say, what about ITT Tech? What about Corinthian? What about Westwood? What about the Predators? Where are you going to hold them accountable? The moral turpitude of scheming and preying on people with dreams and then going out of business and running off with their money, leaving these people high and dry. The student loan forgiveness, it's an important thing, and it's going to impact. It's going to help the Black community. It's going to help communities of color. There's a lot of people got caught, victimized by those predator schools. All right, so yeah, I mean, that's still going to continue as an issue. I mean, I heard a story the other day. They called it a bailout. A bailout for whom? I mean, bailing out the borrowers, that's worthwhile. You know, but to pay for that, you got to go after the people who funded these loans. You got to go after the people who said, hey, got a dream? Here's some money. Federal government, go to it. It's easy. It's not that easy, especially if you're dealing with a school that was strictly for profit. And you see for-profit private school, you should run the other way, because for-profit means they're not for your education. For-profit means they're not for you. For-profit means they're for that. They're for-profit. They will do anything for you to take out these loans, these predator loans. Now, I'm sure there's some good schools out there who will get you into a med tech or a surgical tech job. Look at their track record. Look at what they do. Look who's funding them. I'm sure there's some older schools out there that are worth a darn. But many of these these nonprofit private schools, the Republicans are backing them because most of them are run by Republicans. And they prey on exactly the same people that the schools prey on. Poor, inexperienced communities of color. All right, just a few more things I want to touch on today. God, I guess the big talk, if you're a 49er fan, Jimmy Garoppolo, his Asian American agent, who also represents Tom Brady. I mean, big time agent, but he only does the high price quarterbacks. Couldn't get a deal for Jimmy Garoppolo for the San Francisco 49ers. So Garoppolo said, okay, I'll restructure my contract, take less money. I'll take a no trade clause. I'll sit in the back. Now, I actually don't like this idea because, well, it's good in a way because Jimmy Garoppolo had nowhere to go. No one apparently wanted to take a chance on him. No one wanted to pay him more money. Instead of the 49ers releasing him and having a rival pick him up, keep him. The fact is they may need to keep him because Jimmy Garoppolo is bad, well, not bad, but as limited as he might be, still was able to take the 49ers to a Super Bowl one year, close another year. He's not the perfect quarterback, but he is a high-priced backup, the highest priced backup in the league, and better than the other backups, Nate Sudfeld. I like Sudfeld, but he's not Jimmy Garoppolo. So you want Garoppolo insurance because, frankly, Trey Lance, the rookie starter who was put ahead of Garoppolo, given the keys to the kingdom and said, go do it, hasn't really impressed in the preseason. They're going to the season opener on September 11th, and I don't know, Trey Lance still looks unfinished. Still looks not quite ready for prime time. In which case, Garoppolo, who's been there, done that, might be the 49ers insurance policy. I know, it's intriguing because you didn't want Garoppolo just to walk and go to another team where he could come back and get at the 49ers. This way, Trey Lance starts. I'm not wishing him ill. I want him to do well. But quarterbacks get hurt all the time. And this may be the ideal way that this thing works its way out. I don't know if Jimmy Garoppolo loses all the money in the contract that he restructured, but I guess he could have gotten something like $14 million. He's going to end up with like $6 million. But there's some incentives to make up for the lost money. It's just, hey, things could be worse. Garoppolo's getting older. He's been banged up. This may be the best way. The best way to see the 49ers begin their season. And if things happen the way they usually do in football, starting quarterbacks get hurt. And who's the insurance policy? Jimmy Garoppolo. All right, I didn't really want to talk about sports, but I was going to talk about Serena Williams, so why not talk about Jimmy Garoppolo? I want to say something nice about Serena Williams because I like her, but I have to admit, is it too much to admit that I was a Venus guy? I liked Venus. I like Venus. I like the older sister. I don't know why. I just thought when she first came on the scene, she was the dynamo. And then little sister Serena came up, and I was still focused on Venus. Then I noticed, wow, Venus is backsliding, and here comes Serena. And then you'll know for a while Venus backslid, but Venus made a comeback. I mean, she was playing great. Impermanence, right? Serena was up and down, but mostly up. No one knew what she was going to do yesterday at the U.S. Open, so they had a little celebration. She won her match. Some people thought it was the best she's played in 5 years. You got to admire Serena Williams. She represents something for all communities of color, all women, and, whenever they exclude men in that all-encompassing, inclusive kind of description, she's quick to say, oh, and men too. It's good. I have nothing against the feminists. I love women's sports. I coached women's soccer. I love women's basketball. They still can beat me. That's not why I love it, because it's a slightly slower game, and you can, when it's played well, it's beautiful. Basketball, soccer, women's national team stuff, even hockey. I got into the women's hockey team thing. Softball to a degree, but softball isn't baseball. Anyway. But I do like women's sports. And you look back at Serena's resume, she really opened things up for women, for people of color, and she'll never be forgotten. Never. She'll be known for her twirl. She'll be known for all the things she does. She'll be known for being outspoken, for being an individual. And now she's a mother, right? She's showing all sorts of aspects to her personality that, as a person evolves, they pick up these things. We always knew it was in her, but it's a new phase in life. And they said something about, she's leaving at the top of her game. I guess, people were saying that the match she has tomorrow on Wednesday is up against someone who has long haul COVID. Maybe she has a shot to beat her. It's a number 2 seed. And if that happens, oh my God, maybe we have an upset in the making. It would be a kind of fairy tale story that you would expect as Serena says goodbye. But I think it's great. I think it's great for tennis, the sport. I think it's great for what it says to African American boys and girls. Here's a person of color from Compton, a role model. Take a bit of her and a bit of you and create the monster in you to go out there and beat the world. She's inspiring. And I know she's also, very likable, right? How can you not like the Williams sisters? But Serena, I'm putting Serena top. I had Venus for a long time. Well, only for sentimental reasons. But now they're going to be playing doubles later on this week. If you're not a U.S. Open fan, catch it. Most of it's on ESPN. Tomorrow, Wednesday, could be her final match. They did a nice celebration, a little video. Oprah was in on it. Gayle King was in on it. And boy, Serena still had it. She still had the Christmas in her shots and moving around her opponent. It was fun watching the match yesterday. Let's hope she stays on. She's a champion. But she's a champion because she represents so much more than tennis, right? So much more than tennis. And that's what happens when you break these color barriers, when you are the person of color, the black person in white spaces, and you're good. There's so much you have to overcome. So much you have to overcome to be champion, just to get there. And hey, King Richard got it right. King Richard got it right, the father. And let's not forget the entire family support structure. That was important. So we cheer Serena Williams. And I think that's going to be it today. I think we are going to say, I was going to talk about Cardinal McElroy. I'll save him for tomorrow. We talk about August 31st. Because it's going to be August 31st. And it's going to be the day that I saw 1 million people on the streets in Manila. And it was 83. Just as things were opening up, right? People were clamoring. They were clamoring for freedom, for democracy. And they had a kind of fake democracy in the Philippines. I'll talk about that tomorrow. But they were out there. This was before people power. It was really the precursor. And I was just happy to witness it, proud to witness it. I'd never seen anything like it before or since. So I was noticing something in the paper about, what was it? It was, there were a couple things in the Washington Post that struck me about this guy. Her grandson decided to take his grandmother to every national park because grandma never had seen a mountain. It sort of reminds me of my own mother. My mother was an immigrant, came in the 50s. She kind of stayed in because she had a heart condition and we didn't have a car. She just knew to stay in. She did some cooking, but mostly she did sitting, and she said the rosary a lot. I mean, does it sound like a lot of your Lolas? Well, my mom was sort of my mom and Lola together. But I remember she was well enough to get out, and I made her get out. And it just dawned on me that she had never seen the city. So I was reading this story about this grandma had never seen any mountains. Grandson took her to every national park. And I said, God, it's like I put my mom in my car, buckled her in, seatbelt. We drove around San Francisco. I said, look at all those tall buildings, Mom. And she was like up there looking at it. She'd never seen it. So if you got a car, I guess the lesson is take your grandma out for a ride or a walk. Whatever will pique her fancy. All right. I'll save the rest for tomorrow. I do want to talk about McElroy, though. He's the bishop in San Diego who became Cardinal, and that's significant. All right. So regular listeners, we'll talk about that tomorrow, along with other August 31st type things. Hey, regular listeners to this show know that, the best way to listen to it, the best way to experience this is to put it on your phone and, just like punch it up on your phone on amok.com or on Facebook, facebook.com/Emil Guillermo/media. On Facebook Watch, I think you'll find it. On YouTube. Yeah, go on YouTube. I could use the algorithmic help there. Just click on it, watch it there on your phone, right? Or on Twitter @EmilAmok. So you got it on your phone, you press go and just lay it down, put the speakers on, listen to it as you wash the dishes or do your laundry, and just have me as that never-ending chatologist with you, your companion. I'm a companion talking about the news. This is news talk. And then always at the end, at the end of every show, and you go fast forward to the end of every show we've done, this is show 378, we do a little meditation. And why meditation? It helps. It can help. Help you from saying the things that you shouldn't say. I know my t-shirt here of my sidekick, Kulantan Gong, says no filter, but sometimes you need the filter. Sometimes the filter helps. Sometimes. So I'm just saying, meditation can help. And the meditation goes like this. It really is just a loving kindness meditation, because a lot of the things that hang us up have to do with shame, or not feeling up to it, not having a high level of self-esteem, shame. And there's one way to deal with that. It's called self-love. It's called being kind to oneself. You know, putting a hand here and a hand here and giving yourself a hug. And if that's too weird, you can imagine it. And I like the loving kindness meditation because it does focus on people, thinking about people who are your benefactors, people who you love. Then you got to include people you hate, people you don't love, maybe with the hopes of getting them to change. And then include a neutral person, people who you don't really care one way or the other, but they're nice people, you think. Include them. And the fourth category, include everyone else. Just everyone you bump into. Include your animals. And then you say, the chants, may you be safe, may you be healthy, may you be happy, may you live with ease. And it happens. The love you give out comes back to you. That's the way it works. I didn't make it up. So, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Back in tomorrow, 2 p.m. Pacific, live right here, amok.com, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Till then, mahal.